guys, a while back I made a video ranking the Batman Arkham villains, but since then, having replayed the game, some of my opinions have changed. So today, I want to go back and re-rank the villains based on this tier system that we got here in front of us. Now, how I'm going to rank the villains is how much of an impact did they actually make on the series, and just how good of a character they were in general. If someone's a good character, but wasn't particularly a good villain, wasn't good at doing villain-type stuff, they're not going to get a very high ranking. However, having an interesting character could at least add some decent elements to it. So, there is a few villains, and it's more about their character throughout the course of the whole series, how it went from Batman Arkham Asylum all the way to Batman Arkham Knight. So it's not necessarily how were they in this game, and then in this game. It's more in their impact as a whole. And I'm going to be ranking this very harshly, just as a preface before we get into this video. Now, we're starting off here with Anarchy. Now, Anarchy was a very interesting character in Batman Arkham Origins. Unfortunately, he was underused, in my opinion. I do believe that he could have been more well-utilized in Batman Arkham Knight, or just utilized in Batman Arkham Knight in some sort of capacity, whether it's a side mission, a DLC, something. But nobody knows what happens to him after the events of Batman Arkham Origins, which kind of unfortunate. He had a lot of potential. You know, he had something that was different about him compared to other, stereotypical type villains who want to get rid of corruption. He was going about it with freaking bombs, which you don't see very often in the Batman Arkham saga, at least. But his messaging always had a very clear reasoning. It wasn't like he just said, I want to get rid of corruption. He kind of went into very deep details as to why he believed these things. So, going with someone like Anarchy, he wasn't the most impactful, but he also wasn't bad either. For his short time that he had, I thought he was very, very good, and someone who was very well spoken. So for that, I'm going to give him a B. Moving on to the Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight is a villain that a lot of people are very mixed on, because people knew the identity of the Arkham Knight going into the game. But that's not really the question. The question is, how good of a villain was he actually? Well, he was decent enough. He was able to go toe-to-toe with Batman, which some people have been able to do to a certain extent. But the Arkham Knight took it to the next level. Now, the only flaw that the Arkham Knight used or had as an actual villain was the fact that he had so many opportunities to kill Batman and just didn't follow through with it because of Scarecrow's plan. Whereas I believe that if it was just if this was a regular villain, he would have just killed Batman for the sake of it, right? Because everything was orchestrated by the Arkham Knight, to my knowledge. The militia and everything, I believe, was orchestrated by the Arkham Knight. Scarecrow could have played a factor with the finances as well, but I believe that Jason Todd would have had more, financial means of putting this army together. Even though they were working together, the Arkham Knight's ultimate goal was to kill Batman. Now, unfortunately, he kind of did the typical, monologuing, spoke too much type thing. So as a villain, I'm also going to put him in B, because he did have his moments. He was able to hurt Batman. But, unfortunately, he did the stereotypical talks too much. Azrael was not really a villain. He was more like someone who wanted to take up the mantle of Batman when Batman, retired or went off at the end of Arkham Knight or whatever it is. He wasn't really a villain. Sure, you had the choice to try to kill Batman, but that was ultimately up to you. His character as an overall villain, he's going in D tier, because he was not a villain. He was not someone who tried to do evil things. Bane. Bane is one of the best of the franchise. He got some of the best boss fights, or one of the best boss fights, I guess you could say. I gave him the honorable mention of my top 3 best boss fights in the franchise. He was a very good villain in Batman Arkham Origins. He, once again, like a lot of these villains do the typical, monologuing too much, but, that's kind of to be expected, the good guys gotta win somehow. But as an overall villain, you get into multiple fights with him, whether it's City, Origins, Arkham Asylum, you get into multiple altercations with Bane. And Bane was someone, especially in Arkham Origins, he knew Batman's identity. I believe he was planning on going public with it, but I'm not 100% sure on that information. It would make sense for him to, though. And Bane had a very massive impact on Batman through the course of this franchise. I'm going to give him A tier. He's not quite S tier. I think that if we had an actual boss fight with him in City, he would have been. But S tier is like for a very few select people. Black Mask, okay. Black Mask is a character who because I don't know much about him. I don't know much around the lore of Black Mask. I don't think he's really featured much in terms of games, movies, and stuff like that. He could be. I think he's more of a comic book character, if I'm not mistaken. But, Black Mask had so much potential that got overshadowed by the Joker, which was more of a financial thing, I believe, more of a financial and safe decision for Batman Arkham Origins. You see him at the very beginning of Batman Arkham City, but outside of that, you don't really see him throughout the entire franchise, with the exception of Origins, right? I mean, he gets killed in a DLC in Arkham Knight, in a very crap DLC. As a villain, he didn't do much, but at least he was there for a side mission in Origins. He's not D. I'm going to give him a C because at least he tried to do something, but it wasn't really anything. But it's still better than someone like Azrael, for instance. The Calendar Man was there at the Nightfall Protocol, actually. That's a cool little Easter egg for those of you who don't know. He was in Batman Arkham City. He was locked up in the basement, telling you those, riddle-type calendar stuff. But he was not a villain that would actually try to pursue Batman. He was not someone who actively tried to go after him. For that, I gotta give him a D. Clayface's role is actually kind of cool in Batman Arkham City. I'm not going to lie. Because there's no indication that Clayface is going to be in this game. While there were subtle hints that the Joker wasn't playing the Joker the entire time throughout the story of Arkham City, that did not necessarily mean at all that Clayface was going to be featured. And again, I think Clayface is more of a comic book character. He's a little bit more of an unknown character compared to some of the other villains. But from what we did see from him in Batman Arkham City, I thought he actually did a pretty good job. He's an actor who's essentially turned evil, and he played the role of the Joker extremely well. So for him, I'm going to give him a B, because his boss fight's also pretty good, actually, if I'm being honest. Copperhead, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, guys. Copperhead is one of the worst boss fights. It's literally a replication of the Ra's al Ghul fight, but worse. It's awful. I hate it. It's tedious. It's annoying. She was not a good villain. Did not like her boss fight or anything. She's going to get C tier because she tried to kill Batman. That's like the minimum, though. So she gets C, and that's me being a bit generous. I know I said it was going to be harsh, but she did try to do something. D tier is for people who just didn't even try to kill Batman, essentially. Deadshot. Deadshot I put in the top 3 best boss fights of the Batman Arkham franchise. And for good reason. That boss fight, that stealth mission, is really, really good. Now, his boss fight in Arkham City, not so good. But Deadshot is at least somewhat consistent in the Batman Arkham franchise, being in City and in Origins. And while he was not in Asylum or Night, his overall, appearances in the games were very good. In Arkham City, before the boss fights, the crime scene investigation stuff was very cool. Killing people basically right in front of Batman. He could have killed Batman and chose not to, essentially. And like I said, his boss fight in Arkham Origins being fantastic, I am going to give him an A tier, just for being somewhat consistent, having one of the best boss fights, and he's a really interesting character, so I'll give him that. Deathstroke. Okay, so this one's kind of interesting, right? Because he went from having one of the top 5 of all time boss fights in Batman Arkham Origins to having one of the worst boss fights in Batman Arkham Knight. The fall from grace is insane. However, for the very short appearances that he did make, he was a very interesting character, to say the least. He was kind of like the backup in Arkham Knight, like the backup Arkham Knight kind of thing. As well as, like I said, his boss fight was extremely good. I have to give him B tier, I think, because while his boss fight was so good, his fall from grace in Arkham Knight just made it knocked him down from A tier to B tier. But I think B tier is a good placement for him overall. Executioner, I don't need to say much about him. He only makes one appearance, and it's very, very brief. You barely see him. You one-shot KO him. He's a cocky young guy, but he's not somebody who's interesting, really. C tier. There's not really much to him. The only good thing about him, the only good thing about his appearance, is that he kind of reminds Batman in a way that, you could save Alfred's life with electrocution. But he didn't do that. Batman just remembered something he had said about jump-starting the heart. So he gets a C tier for just being there. But that's me being a bit generous, like I said. Firefly. Now, he's in a similar boat to the Deathstroke, but not as extreme. I didn't hate his boss fight as much at Arkham Knight, but his boss fight in Arkham Origins wasn't as good. So the fall from grace wasn't really as bad. He's a very interesting character, a pyromaniac, being a Firefly and all. But he wasn't really, too big of a presence throughout the course of the games. But you do have a whole campaign mission surrounding him, having to defuse these bombs, as well as trying to save the hostages, as well as having to take them down. So for the appearances he does make, I do have to put him in B tier. And it seems like I'm putting a lot of people in B tier, but that's because B tier is average. It's like the middle pack. Frank Bowles, he was a corrupt cop or corrupt officer, whatever you want to call him, but he was not a villain. He has to go in D tier. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn was a very consistent villain. I believe she was on all 4 games, all 5 games actually, if you include Batman Arkham Shadow, even though she played as not Harley Quinn, but she was Harleen Quinzel in Arkham Origins and Arkham Shadow before she became Harley Quinn. But her appearances were at least consistent. You know, she did a good job of leading the group in the movie theater, the Panessa Studios, in Arkham Knight. Arkham City, you know, with her Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC, I thought that she was a good, consistent villain. She's like a less good version of the Joker. I'm going to put her in A tier because she's consistently there throughout the course of the game. So some interesting DLCs, some interesting missions, and she was very, very capable. And she's a little bit attractive, but don't tell her I said that. Two-Face. Two-Face. Two-Face was someone who also kind of did not get to live up to their full potential. Now, Batman Arkham Shadow did help save him a little bit. That did raise his stock a little bit, because even though he was the Rat King, that was the least interesting part of him for me. The most interesting part, though, is seeing his psychological changes throughout the course of the game. And, you know, making brief appearances in Batman Arkham City. You play at the very end, when you play as Catwoman, you gotta take out Two-Face. You know, I like the bank robbery missions, actually, in Batman Arkham Knight. Those were very good. He was a consistent villain. He wasn't the best villain, though. He didn't really have a lot of threat. There wasn't really much danger about him. So I'm going to put him in the B tier again. He's average. I think he had more potential to be done, but unfortunately, it just wasn't quite meant to be. Hugo Strange, another one of the villains. This is actually one of the villains I put in the top 3 most underused in the franchise, because he has so much potential, because he's a villain that wants to become Batman. He's like Azrael, but he's actually a villain, and he wants to be Batman, but, you know, do Batman in a way that can actually kill people kind of thing. It's just unfortunate that his short time in Arkham City was kind of overshadowed by the Joker blood plot, and I explained why in a previous video, that essentially Hugo Strange was kind of used as a plot device in a way, and the Joker bloodline plot was kind of used as a way to fill up time so that Hugo Strange could activate Protocol 10. That's essentially it, and he was meant to be the main antagonist of Batman Arkham City. He just didn't get to be used very well, unfortunately, and he was only in the 1 game. So I have to put him in C tier for the way he was used. But, like, I would have loved to be able to put him in B or A tier. It's just he just wasn't used enough or consistent enough to be able to be put in a higher tier. Hush. This is one of, if not the biggest fall from grace, when I say it, in Batman Arkham anything. Right? Hush is a character, for those of you who don't know, he's essentially killing people to remove people's faces, to then surgically make his face look like Bruce Wayne. He's trying to basically just get money from Batman. His side mission in Batman Arkham City was really good, right? You have the crime scene detection. You actually go there to go to his place to actually stop him. And you actually see him with Bruce Wayne's face on, and then he leaves. And it's like, it's kind of left open to interpretation of what's going to happen next. And then Batman Arkham Knight just, he breaks into Wayne Tower and he wants money. It's really underwhelming, unfortunately. I wish that there was more done with him. He had a lot of potential, but unfortunately, as an overall villain, he's got to go in B tier. I would put him in C tier even, but he wasn't that bad. His side mission in Arkham City is so good that I'm going to put him in B tier in terms of a villain. I mean, he killed 6 people, right? That's not nothing. That's more than a lot of villains actually do. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. The Joker, do I even need to say it's the Joker? You know, people could say he's overused, but I think he was used perfectly. The only time I would agree he was overused was Arkham Origins, because I understand Arkham Knight kind of, you know, he was funny in Arkham Knight. He was extremely funny in Arkham Knight. But in Arkham Origins, it just felt like he didn't need to be there. If he was a side mission or a DLC, he should have been a DLC. That's what the Joker should have been. But he's definitely S tier. He's, like, Batman Arkham Asylum alone, he's definitely an S tier. Killer Croc. Killer Croc is someone who's also kind of, he's very consistent throughout the games. Even if his missions are very little, he is still very consistent. Arkham Asylum has that creepy boss fight level where you have to basically throw a batarang at him every time he comes at you. You know, Batman Arkham City, you can actually see him very briefly down in the sewers, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, it's actually kind of a cool concept that you could see Killer Croc in that game. Arkham Origins, he has a pretty good boss fight, a very good introduction boss fight. And Arkham Knight has that Season of Infamy DLC. He's a very consistent character. He's a very good one. I'm going to put him in A tier because he's got some really good boss fights to him. The Mad Hatter. Okay, this is gonna be a hot take, but the Mad Hatter is not a good villain in my opinion. I don't care for his antics. I don't care for his, I don't know, whatever. He drugs you and basically puts you in this delusional la land, like in Batman Arkham Origins or Batman Arkham City, Batman Arkham Knight. I just don't personally care for those types of missions personally, and he was never really a threat to Batman. He kind of just wanted to toy with him, but never really made any actual attempt to do anything with it. He's gonna go in C tier, but the only reason why he's not in D tier is because at least he was consistently in the games. And some people might like Mad Hatter. I just personally don't. Man-Bat. I really love Man-Bat, actually. I love that side mission. It's such an interesting concept because he does get seen very briefly in Batman the Animated Series, actually. I don't know how many episodes he's in. I don't think it's very many. But he is a very interesting character who essentially inserts himself with, I believe it's some type of, bat blood, essentially. And he's trying to figure out a way to turn humans into, a half-man, half-bat thing. Something along the lines. I'm not too familiar on the lore on Man-Bat, so if you guys know, just let me know down in the comments. But this is a very good side mission, but as an overall villain, he's not really a villain. He did kill his wife, but he didn't voluntarily kill his wife. He injected himself with the blood and then killed his wife. It was just a really sad story to hear about. But as a villain, there isn't really much to him outside of that. He's going to go in C tier because his side mission was really interesting. And it wasn't like he was nothing. He did more than these three combined in terms of actually attempting to do something. Mr. Freeze, top 3 boss fights in the franchise, had a really good DLC in Season of Infamy, the best DLC in the Arkham franchise with Cold Heart. That could be a hot take, but debate me, whatever. But he's a consistent and featured villain who's really, really cool. I love his suit. I love everything about him. He's just trying to save his dying wife. So you could argue he's not a villain, but he's consistent and he's interesting. So because of the fact that he's not a villain, I can't put him in S tier, unfortunately. But for being an overall Batman, villain, you have to take him on in the boss fight in the Cold Heart DLC. He does try to fight you and kill you. So there is that as well. So I'm going to put him in A tier because of the fact that he does try to kill you. If he didn't try to kill you in the Batman Arkham City boss battle or the Batman Arkham Origins boss battle, I would have put him in B tier as a villain. But because he does try to kill you on multiple occasions, even though it's just to save his wife, but the justification doesn't matter, he's going to go in A tier. The Penguin. The Penguin's not a bad villain. I mean, he does try to go after you, in Batman Arkham City a little bit. He's, like I've said before, he's consistent, but he's not really someone who tries to actively kill Batman. But as a villain, he is fairly decent, Batman Arkham City, he was alright in the Iceberg Lounge. He did try to kill you. He did try to 6 Solomon Grundy on you. And like I said before, he is consistent. Batman Arkham Origins, you do see him, but that's mostly just to beat him up. And Batman Arkham Knight, you see him a little bit. You have that side mission with the guns and stuff. I'm going to put him in B tier for villain. But, I do like the Penguin as a character, though. I like that British accent. Pig. Now, Pig is someone who is very, very interesting as well. Because he does kill, 6 people before you finally are able to catch him. And he's essentially someone who kills people who cannot be perfected. He doesn't necessarily kill people just for the sake of it, right? He tries to surgically mutilate people to take away any sort of defects and make them perfect. But if he can't make them perfect, he will kill them. And his side mission, his boss battle, is actually kind of decent. It's okay. He is only featured in 1 game, so we do have to take him down marks for that. But as a villain, with some of the coolest crime scene investigation in the franchise, I want to put him in A tier, but I just don't think he lines up to the actual A tier lineup. I have to put him in B tier. He's only featured in 1 game, and he doesn't really try to actively kill Batman, and that's kind of part of it as well, but I will put him in B tier. Poison Ivy, she does try to kill Batman in Batman Arkham Asylum. In Batman Arkham City, she does try to kill Catwoman. She's not in Arkham Origins and in Arkham Knight. She actually saves Gotham. So as a villain, she's not the best villain, but she does try to, kill Batman. You do get into multiple altercations with her. I'm going to put her in C tier, though. She's not the best villain, necessarily. Ra's al Ghul, again, he's not the best villain, right? He's not a bad guy, necessarily. He's more just trying to clean up corruption in the least cliche way possible, I guess you could say. Leader of the League of Assassins. Very much abuses the Lazarus Pit to artificially extend his life. I would definitely say that Ra's al Ghul was a good character. somewhat consistent, not somewhat consistent, I guess you could say. But as a villain, as a threat to Batman, he's gonna go in C tier, unfortunately. The Riddler. Now, the Riddler, this might be a hard... Like, I used to be so hard on the Riddler, but in recent times, I've come to realize he's in every single game, right? He is someone that consistently tries to toy with Batman. He's not necessarily trying to beat Batman physically, he's trying to beat him psychologically. But in Arkham Knight, he finally snaps and tries to kill Batman. You know, he's consistent, and for what he's trying to do, I will put him in S tier, only because, you know, he does have a somewhat interesting boss battle in Batman Arkham Knight. I like the Riddler rooms in Batman Arkham City. I like the Riddler's character, which also plays a factor. But him and Joker are like the most consistent characters throughout the franchise, who either are trying to kill Batman or mess with him on some level. And for the objective that the Riddler was trying to complete, he does do a good job toying with Batman, and then eventually finally just trying to kill him in Arkham Knight. Scarecrow. Scarecrow was an unfortunate character who was used very, very well in Batman Arkham Asylum. He does try to, you know, use his fear against you. Of course, he's Scarecrow. As a villain, I thought he was decent, but I thought he had a lot more potential. You know, I would have liked to see him in Batman Arkham Origins. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see him. Batman Arkham Knight, he wanted to reveal his identity to the world. I think Scarecrow was good, but I think he had a lot of wasted potential. I'm going to put him in the B tier because he could have been better. If he had actually, like, killed Batman or attempted to kill Batman, he would have got A tier. But he more so just wanted to mess with him. And I know I said that for Riddler, that was a good thing. But in Scarecrow's case, he's not in all the games. He's not the most, you know, interesting character in the world. The Riddler is at least somewhat interesting. I have to give him B tier, unfortunately. Shiva, not a great villain. Very mediocre boss fight. Not consistent throughout the franchise. I have to give her C tier. Solomon Grundy, very underrated boss fight, actually. His boss fight was actually pretty decent. But again, not a consistent character. But he does try to kill Batman. And, like, I understand that just trying to kill Batman doesn't necessarily dictate how good you are as a villain. But, you know what, I also like his riddles and stuff, too. He is in Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate as well. That boss fight was just annoying. Talia al Ghul. She was not really a villain. She was more of an ally to Batman than anything else. As a villain, she's got to go D tier. Deacon Blackfire, you're in D tier. Victor Zsasz had one of the best side missions, if not the best side missions, in the Batman Arkham franchise, which was Batman Arkham Cities. And Victor Zsasz, you know, he's a bit psychotic. He's probably the most psychotic character in the franchise. And I know people are saying, what about the Joker? Nah, bro. I think Victor Zsasz is even more crazy. I think he's even more out of his mind. Because the Joker doesn't seem like he's, like, unaware of what he's doing. It seems like Victor Zsasz is not in his own right head. Whereas the Joker at least seems more aware of what's going on. But doesn't make an appearance in Batman Arkham Origins. He does make an appearance very briefly in Arkham Asylum. As a villain, he is relatively interesting, but I'm gonna give him B tier on this one. So guys, this is my tier list. I'm sure I've probably made some mistakes. I'll probably visit it in another year's time and go back and re-rank them. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. How would you rank this? Make sure you guys go check out this tier list. Thank you guys so much for watching. We are so close to 1,000 subs. Do you guys know what happens when we get to 1,000 subscribers? Come on. The 4 Batman Arkham games in one day on a live stream. Come on, how are you going to beat that? Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.